if you go deep, 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 deep in the rabbit hole to what I call the spider in the end is not human. And it's not even in this dimension, ultimately, although it does cross obviously into this dimension and works through these networks of cold control. And obviously I've also become well known for talking about reptilian and other non-human entities that are involved in this manipulation. But keep going and keep going and keep going. And what you find in the end is simply a state of consciousness that is behind all this, which expresses itself through non-human entities, through this spider network and the network of the cult within human society. So in the end, where I'm going with this is that what is behind this is simply consciousness. And it's a very imbalanced state of consciousness. You know, we see people who are nice and genuine and kind, and then we see psychopaths. What you're looking at, although you're looking at two apparent physical bodies, what you're looking at is two different states of consciousness. That's what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the way that consciousness expresses itself is different. And what we're looking at behind this whole network of human control is ultimately a very imbalanced, fiercely imbalanced state of consciousness that I would perhaps call ultra-psychopathic. And I talk about artificial intelligence with that kind of introduction, because a question that's very rarely asked is, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? And it actually takes a number of forms.
Only on Be Positive.
It's intelligence in the sense that it can make decisions having assessed information. And there's different levels, like I say, of this intelligence. On one level, you've got algorithmic AI. This is encoded, quote, intelligence, which allows that level to make decisions on whether this is done or that's done, if the technology does this or the technology does that. Even down now, in great extremes, they're introducing military technology where AI is deciding if it's used or not, and who on. So then you go to the next level of AI, which is called learning AI. It's one name for it anyway. And this is a level of AI which can accrue more and more and more knowledge by information it receives and processes. So it becomes, if you like, cleverer and cleverer and cleverer in proportion to the information that it's receiving. And I would make this point, that when you look at social media and all this surveillance that goes on and tracking of people's information, you can see it, and on one level that would be true as a big surveillance operation, but it's more than that. All the stuff that humans are constantly posting on the internet, not least on social media, is being fed into this level of AI, which learns from it and absorbs it. And that level of AI has long passed the point where it is utterly expert and gathering more expertise every day, every minute in fact, in human behavior and human psychology. And therefore the ability to make decisions in terms of technological actions and where they want it to go, which is direct connection to the human brain, to make decisions to manipulate that psychology to get what it is programmed to want. In other words, to get people to think and act the way it wants. This is the whole point about connecting AI to the human brain. It's so that AI becomes the human mind, it becomes human emotion, it becomes human perception and thought. Once AI is connected to the human brain, it will do more and more of human thinking until, these are his words, human thinking as we currently know it will be basically negligible. In other words, the human mind will become the AI mind. And instead of manipulating perception by controlling information, which they've had to do up to this point, we will be getting perceptions directly from AI, and there will be no human perception as we've come to know it. That's the whole point. But that's only one level. That's the next level of AI. There's another level of AI, which I say is this consciousness, is this deeply disturbed, imbalanced, ultra-psychopathic consciousness, which the Gnostic people over the centuries called archons.
Only on Be Positive.
They said in their writings. There was an amazing find in 1945 in an earthen jar that was found at a place called Nag Hammadi, about 75, 80 miles north of Luxor in Egypt. And when they looked at the contents, it was the writings of this group known as Gnostics. And there used to be something called the Royal or Great Library of Alexandria, which was an amazing depository of ancient knowledge and writings and history. At one point, they had about 500,000 scrolls there. And that was overseen by basically Gnostic thinkers who saw the world in a particular way. What they believed was that this was a fake reality, what we would now call a simulation. And they described what this force was that was behind it. And about a fifth of the content of these many, many scrolls in this earthen jar, which were kind of, it's believed that they were probably put in that jar and hidden around 400 AD, which would kind of fit, the demise of the Great Library of Alexandria, because the Roman Catholic Church basically destroyed it. Of course, they didn't want that, did they? Because it completely overturned the Roman Catholic view of everything. And about a fifth of these writings were about these archons, this archontic force that was manipulating human society, and indeed had created what we would call today a simulation to entrap that human consciousness. And they talked about how this archontic force was, in its base form, just energy. It didn't take a form, it took the form of just energy, what I am describing as consciousness.
Yeah.
And interestingly, what is interesting to me, the writings said that when this archontic consciousness, as I would call it, takes form, the two major forms it takes are reptilian and
only on Be
like
Positive.
a grey fetus with big black eyes, which is quite a pretty good description of the so-called greys of UFO legend. And because it's consciousness and not what we would call physical, it can infiltrate and control technological systems. And therefore, this smart grid is why everything's called smart these days. If it's called smart in terms of technology or called smart in terms of the way something is done, a process, then it's all part of the same grid called the smart grid. The idea is that the AI, through this smart grid of technology, controls the internet, controls everything connected to the internet, which is this Internet of Things, where all these technologies are now controlled by the internet, including your car.